What if I told you that some of Jamaica's most important healers, people who provided medicine, spiritual support, and guidance, were once hunted by colonial rulers? In the early 1900s, deep in the hills of Manchester, stood Blakespen Balmyard. It was more than a healing center. It was a sanctuary of African wisdom, a refuge for the community, and a quiet act of resistance in a world determined to criminalize African spirituality. Established in the 1870s by Rose Anne Forbes, by the early 1900s, Blakespen had grown into a spiritual institution, a pillar of the community and a vital element of Jamaica's holistic healing heritage. But as its influence grew, so did the watchful eyes of colonial authorities who were determined to suppress African-derived spiritual traditions. In 1910, the pressure finally reached Rose Anne Forbes. On August 3rd, she was charged under Jamaica's newly strengthened medical laws for practicing medicine without a license. She was found guilty and ordered to pay a substantial fine. But Blakespen Balmyard did not fade away. Instead, the healing work continued, with Rose Anne and her husband George Forbes running what newspaper described as a bombing sanatorium. On July 3, 1916, Rose Anne and her husband George Forbes were arrested in Mandeville, charged with practicing Obeah, and placed in lockup. The case moved forward, and on April 4, 1917, the trial of George Forbes began. But testimony revealed the extent of the healer's work. People of all backgrounds sought them out, and many testified that the Forbes herbal baths and remedies were more effective than conventional European medicine. The judge then delivered a stern lecture to George Forbes, but he did not stop there. Rose Anne was summoned before the bench and warned to discontinue her healing work entirely. The threat was unmistakable. If either of them ever returned to court on similar charges, they could face a €50 fine, an enormous sum at that time, along with imprisonment. The story of Rose Anne and George Forbes is more than a legal case. It's a window into Jamaica's long struggle for the freedom to practice African spirituality. Balmyards like Blakespen were not merely sanatoriums, they were spaces of resistance, care, and community survival. The colonial legal system could impose fines, threats, and surveillance, but it could never extinguish the resilience of Jamaica's African healing traditions or the legacy of those who kept them alive.